Welcome to this explainer. Very second, there are brilliant biological mechanisms keeping you alive. We so often take our bodies for granted, but today, we're going to treat your body like what it truly is, the ultimate, highly complex, impeccably run factory.
So, let's dive into this by asking a deceptively simple question that immediately drops us into the fascinating world of life processes. What is actually happening under your skin to keep you breathing, moving, and just thinking? Well, it isn't magic. It's pure mechanics. It's a continuous, non-stop sequence of highly coordinated maintenance jobs.
Here's our factory tour map for today. We'll start with the basics of life, move on to fueling up with nutrition, look at digestion to see how we break it all down, then respiration for generating energy, and finally circulation, the delivery highway. All right, part one, the basics of life. So when we talk about a life process, what we really mean is a continuous sequence of survival jobs. It's a completely seamless flow. You're taking in nutrients from the outside world, you're oxidizing them to release energy, transporting those vital elements around, and eventually expelling the waste. And, if this production line stops, well, the factory shuts down permanently. The entire natural world is elegantly divided into two distinct operational models. On one side, you've got the primary manufacturers, the autotrophs. Think of green plants. They sit right at the base of the food chain, synthesizing their own food from basic inorganic raw materials like carbon dioxide and water, using just sunlight. Incredible, right? And then on the other side, we have the heterotrophs, the consumers. That's you and me. We literally can't make our own food from scratch, so we have to outsource. We essentially contract out our fuel needs by getting it directly or indirectly from those autotrophic producers. Moving right along to part two, fueling up with nutrition. To really understand our fuel, we actually have to look at our upstream suppliers, the plants. They operate these brilliant automated intake valves called stomata. Look at how this works. When water flows into the guard cells around these tiny pores, they swell up and that forces the valve open to take in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. But when that CO2 isn't needed, they just shrink and seal up tight to conserve water. It is a highly responsive, totally automated valve system regulating gas exchange just to build the fuel that we eventually consume. Okay, part three, digestion, breaking it down. Since humans follow what's called a holozoic mode of nutrition, which basically just means we take in whole foods, our bodies have to run a highly efficient dismantling line to get to the usable fuel. It happens in 5 exact steps. First is ingestion, literally getting the shipment onto the loading dock. Then comes digestion, a chemical bath breaking complex molecules into simple, usable ones using enzymes. Next up is absorption, moving those soluble particles right onto the conveyor belt of your bloodstream. Then assimilation, where your cells actually use them for energy and repair. And finally, egestion, clearing all the unusable scrap off the factory floor. And this dismantling line starts the exact moment a shipment enters that loading dock, your mouth. You actually have 32 specialized physical tools working in perfect tandem here. You've got 4 incisors up front for precise biting, 2 canines built for tearing, and then your premolars and molars at the back acting as heavy-duty grinders. They crush the food to massively increase its surface area before it even hits your stomach. It is pure mechanical engineering at its finest. But the sheer scale of your internal factory is truly staggering when you think about what happens after the stomach. The food enters the small intestine, and this single organ is a highly coiled, twisted tube measuring a massive 7 meters long. 7 meters! That's over 22 feet of machinery packed incredibly efficiently right into your abdomen. And its inner lining is covered in millions of tiny finger-like projections called villi. This is a brilliant feature because it massively increases the surface area to ensure every last drop of digested fat, carbohydrate, and protein is absorbed perfectly into your bloodstream. Which brings us to part 4, respiration, generating energy. Because think about it, having a warehouse full of supplies doesn't do you any good unless you can generate actual power from it. Respiration is the prime directive here. It's all about oxidizing glucose to create ATP, which is literally the energy currency of your cells. Now, the human body thrives on efficiency. When this oxidation happens with oxygen, we call it aerobic respiration, and it yields a massive 38 ATP molecules per glucose molecule. It's super efficient. But say you're doing a hard sprint, your muscles can actually face an oxygen debt. When that happens, they're forced to switch to a desperate, kind of messy backup generator called anaerobic respiration. This emergency process yields a measly 2 ATP and produces toxic exhaust in the form of lactic acid. And actually, it's the buildup of that lactic acid that triggers those painful muscle cramps. So to maintain that high-efficiency 38 ATP aerobic production, your body relies on this brilliant, involuntary mechanical bellows system. We call it breathing. It's an absolute marvel of physics and pressure differentials. During inhalation, your diaphragm flattens down and your ribs lift up. This enlarges your chest cavity, which drops the internal pressure, so air is literally sucked down your trachea and right into your balloon-like alveoli. Then, during exhalation, the diaphragm relaxes, the chest cavity compresses, and all that waste CO2 is physically forced back out into the atmosphere.
All right, final stop, part 5. Circulation, the delivery highway. The absolute engine of this delivery highway is, of course, your heart. It's this reddish, muscular structure about the size of a fist, weighing only around 300 grams. Yet it operates as an incredibly ingenious double pump mechanism. If you look at the flow here, the right side pumps deoxygenated blood to the lungs to pick up oxygen, while the left side is simultaneously pumping that freshly oxygenated blood out through the aorta to the rest of the body. It's this strict, meticulous separation that absolutely guarantees maximum efficiency for our high-energy needs. And the immense pressure required to push all this blood through literally miles of arteries and veins? That's generated by the heart's ventricles, rhythmically contracting and relaxing, a cycle we call systole and diastole. This pressure is perfectly and precisely calibrated. A normal, healthy reading sits right at 120/80. That 120 is the systolic pressure, the maximum force when the ventricle contracts, and the 80 is the diastolic pressure, which is the residual force when the ventricle relaxes so it can refill. So, as we wrap up our tour of your biological factory today, just take a moment to appreciate this. Every single time you take a breath, every time that 300-gram heart of yours beats, millions of processes are firing perfectly in sync to extract nutrients, run chemical reactions, and keep you moving. You literally have an immense, complex, and beautiful machinery silently working around the clock to keep you alive. So the only question left is, what are you going to do with all that energy today? Thanks for joining this explainer, and keep marveling at the incredible science happening right inside of you.